The entire movie was storyboarded before we started to shoot. I knew the look of the movie and what we wanted to go for. Now, everything changes when you get there.
The analogy is painting a picture. Your concept changes. As you're painting it, your ideas evolve, and the final picture might be different to your original ideas.
And you have hours and days and weeks and months of talking about ideas you had that never even made it to screen. And then sometimes you look up there and you go, phew, never even thought of that scene. Never even worked on it. That one just happened, that one take.
You find opportunities that happen on the moment, and oh, that's a great idea, let's do it. In attacking the look of the film, first thing I did was talk with Seamus McGarvey, our DP, to try and figure out what do we want to go for. And obviously, heat was one of the big things, the heat of the Sahara. Being that we were shooting in January, February, March, there actually wasn't a lot of heat, so you weren't getting the natural heat rising off the sands. So Seamus actually designed a filter, which we now call the Sahara Gold filter.
Bad stop on that.
Here's our filter that we made especially for the film. It's made by Schneider, and it's a mixture of 3 filters, a gold, a sepia, and an 812 warming filter. And it's a really beautiful.
It whitened out the skies a little bit, took a little bit of the blue out of the skies, and warmed up the skin tones. Kind of a brownish straw look is really the look of the film, the coloring of the film.
You pan around and put it on this, and then put it in the filter.
We then want to decide on the aspect ratio. What is the look of the film, and what's the best aspect ratio of the film to capture the image? 1.85 we could have shot, or 2.35, which is Super 35. We decided to go for the wider vistas, the 2.35, in order to catch the wide vistas of the desert. And the desert's a long, wide space, not a tall New York skyscraper type of space.
I never worked in Africa before, and I think that was the big incentive. It was a pleasure of creating the African background for the movie.
Anna spent months custom dyeing fabrics, and she had researchers in Nigeria and all over Africa advising her about various aspects of dress in Nigeria and Mali.
Because of the political situation in both of those countries, production wasn't very happy to send me there to do my research there. So I have to be dependent on books and images, sort of printed images and documentary films. A lot of people think that costume designers just create costumes for the main characters. But apart from that, I am responsible for all the extras. And in the case of Sahara, we were creating the river travel, which goes from Nigeria to Mali in Morocco.
We took over a little town outside Efu called Razani, which we turned into a northern Malian town. And Shepard has done a marvellous job with the costumes, managed to get 150, 200 people who were the right colour, the right facial characteristics for northern Mali.
How many people today? I think about, I'm not quite sure. Should be 100 people, more or less. A small day for you guys.
You have to manufacture everything. The headdresses, the jewelry, all ornaments, shoes, belts, bags, whatever is part of the look. I have to create big Tuareg camps. For that, I have to buy fabrics, dye, distress, manufacture about 300 costumes for children, for women, and also for the Tuareg fighters.
First day with extras, 100 Tuaregs, 20 on horses and 80 on foot. It's going well.
It's a big day for you, Hatimi.
Huh?
It's a very big day for you.
No, it's a light day, really a light day. That's not big. Big ones are coming ahead.
The clothes had to look probable. They have to be old, they have to be worn, but at the same time had to look beautiful.
The Texas and that coin were on the Niger River. It's one of these jobs that you look at, and if you don't notice it, that's part of the compliment.
The river's depth obviously increased enough to breach the banks.
She loved the white linen suits. She even dug it when I said, I'm gonna grab a flower in this scene and put it right there. She was like, beautiful.
Have you ever seen a Confederate gold dollar? Oh, God, please, don't. Of course not. Because the Confederacy never made a gold dollar. The mint was destroyed at the end of the war.
I beg you, on my hands and knees, don't.
But not before. Jefferson Davis had 5 samples made.
The museum scene that's supposed to be in Lagos, Nigeria, was actually in a museum in Barcelona, and the costumes in that with these fantastic headpieces that are very typically Nigerian were all created by Anna and her department.
Marine salvage.
Nigerian party dress is the most colorful and bold thing I've seen in my life, and all women are wearing huge, colorful headdresses that look like half of Christmas tree. It's not only the artistic issue, creating the costumes, it's also this huge organization, because it's a lot of stand action. He was doing a lot of that himself, but then he had his stuntman. His stuntman had a double, so he's doing huge continuity job.
In thinking about the style of the movie, what are the visual cues we're going to go for, especially the intensity cues for the action? What I decided to do is that most of the movie is shot either static or on cranes or dollies with fluid, clean movements. But when we get into the action, it becomes handheld. The cameras get mounted directly on the cars without any dampening, so you get the shake and you get the vibration, and that there's a clear distinction between the more fluid pieces in the movie, the non-active, and then the action pieces, which have a much more frenetic feel to them.
About 6 or 7 months before we started shooting, we started storyboarding all the sequences, but particularly the solar plant, because we needed that in the most detail. The plant itself is based on a real solar thermal plant. There are several in the world.
Well, there's one in Japan, there's one in the Mojave Desert, and there's one in Almeria, Spain. The one in Almeria is in use, and we actually went and scouted it. We got to see how the light was interacting with the tower.
That's strange.
You have to wear these special goggles when you go to see it, dark, dark goggles, because the light is so piercing that it'll burn your retina. So you'd wear these funky goggles and look up at the tower, and it's just a blur of light.
Doing initial concept drawings, it became obvious that we were only going to be able to build a very small element of the solar plant, and all the rest would have to be digital.
I would do a sketch of the solar plant with its 1,000 mirrors, its central tower, its central buildings, its perimeter fence, its watchtowers, the gates, what all those might look like. And then I sit down with the visual effects supervisor and say, okay, I'm going to build this part of it, and this part is for you.
Certainly in pre-production, we became almost part of the art department. In fact, the whole design of the physical set that we built for the top of the tower was a collaboration between the special effects draftsmen and the pre-visualization people.
The production designer should have control of the whole visual element of the movie. And I've seen a few films where I think that's been lost because the designer has designed the sets and then CG's been added, and somewhere the overall concept has got lost.
We went to a ancient volcano field in Morocco where we had unlimited vistas, pretty much, and built the gate area and the guard shack and put in, I think it was 20 mirrors.
We worked out from our concept work that we were going to have 8,000 mirrors. Breck was very clever. He shot as much as he could using just those mirrors. And then, of course, when he ran out of set, we filled in the gaps.
What we have here is about a dozen of these mirrors that were mocked up to be used interactively, but we obviously had to create 8,000 of these. Once we've actually positioned them into the base, you can see that we start getting the idea of how the shot's going to look. All 8,000 of these mirrors are fully working, animatable, correctly reflecting mirrors, and you can see here we're starting to already see the reflection of the tower.
The most interesting part of the action takes place on the helicopter landing pad, which is on top of the 300-foot tower, which is in the middle of the solar plant, which collects all the light from the solar panels. And we built that just outside Erfoud in Morocco, about 35 feet off the ground. Helicopters could land on it. People could fall on moving mirrors. When you see the movie, it's pretty exciting, I think.
We decided to build a section of this so that we could stage the real fight in Morocco, in the desert, with desert light, with a real helicopter, and with enough distant background that we could make it believable that we were only going to build the set at 30 feet above the ground. There were lots of reasons for not building it any higher: safety, cost, all sorts of things.
We started building the base that the solar plant would actually sit on. First of all, we took a map painter and asked him to paint up some dust roads and access pathways around the edge of the solar plant, as well as, on the director's request, some small props.
The only element we've used from the live action is the very top of the tower with the two figures on top.
The heaviest concentration of special effects is in the last act of the movie, Reels 6 and 7, which starts with Massarde's solar plant and goes through to finding the ship in the desert.
You read it and you're thinking, ironclads, how fantastic. This is the kind of stuff we can get our teeth into.
For me, the most interesting thing about Sahara, and one of the reasons I did it, was the Civil War aspect to it. Technically, it was a big challenge to put the rig inside, the flotation tanks, the motors to control it, the rudder systems, cannons that fire within a set. That was technically quite difficult.
We were hoping it was going to float. It did float, thankfully, but a lot of thought had to go into that.
At one time, we toyed with the idea of using a model ship. And it turned out that economically, it was better for us to actually build this ironclad barges so that it could actually move.
The opening of the film, of course, is the American Civil War, and we open in full battle in Richmond, Virginia. One of Double Negative's biggest shots was the establishing shot of Richmond, Virginia, which moves across in one big crane move to reveal the ironclad. It looks like Rome burning. There are buildings collapsing, there are explosions still taking place, and as we come down to the ironclad, cannonballs with flaming trails have been animated into the shot. The art department built 1-to-1 scale on a small lake down in southern England.
Hawley Lake's actually on military land, which is ideal for us. We could make a bit of noise. It's set in an area like that. And we built the ironclad basically as a tubular platform. The Marine Department, which was headed by Lance Julian, put the engines in and we sailed it.
The same set was used for the opening of the movie as was used for the ending, but the ending we aged it. The exterior of the boat was moved to Tingras Valley in Morocco, in Erfoud in the desert, where we built it and piled sand up on it.
My challenge was to get this ironclad into a sand dune, which sounds fairly easy on the surface, but actually when you start moving hundreds of tons of sand and try and build into sand dunes, the sand shifts all the time, and it becomes quite a major construction problem.
When it was built, we built it specifically so that you could take it down in sections, put it on a truck, and drive it out to the desert, and then put the framework up and build it again. Inside, all the beams and the timber work were solid. Quite often, if you've got to make a huge beam, you'll box one up. But in this case, they needed to be solid because when we came to age it down, we went into those beams with chainsaws, cut into them so that they would look as though they'd been eaten away. We then went in with a sandblaster. In the process of sandblasting, everything gets covered in sand, which was an added bonus for us. And you really eat into the wood. The sandblasting eats into the wood, gives a fantastic texture.
Dominic Tui, our physical effects supervisor, built a giant motion base that had vertical and horizontal movement. So every time the boat got hit, he would shake it.
Because it's very easy to film and say this is a boat and make the camera move to give you the impression that the boat is actually moving. But uniquely to this film, we did the opposite. We actually physically moved the set.
I remember when we wrote the boat chase scene, it started off as just a simple one boat chasing another boat. Then we decided to add 2 boats on the next pass. Then I'm like, well, what about if there's another boat behind them?
And then not only do you have to have those 2 boats, you have to have a boat that you're going to blow up. So we needed a 3rd boat. There was just the shell of the boat.
We had 1 Calliope from the 3 that would be just for special effects. That enabled us to damage this boat. It enabled us to drill holes in it, make the rigs work for us.
Boom, 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 follow the flames, get a couple different explosions.
Even though the boat looks like it's got stainless steel windows, trims and anchors, we would replace those for lightweight, and in some cases we would use high expansion foam, in other cases we would use timber, and we would paint it to make it look like chrome. So the debris that we were emitting from the boat, we knew there was going to be no sharp objects.
In writing action sequences, the most important thing to remember is that the audience should always be surprised about how it comes out. And you never, ever want to do the same trick twice. And Sahara never does that.
We got a lot of footage that didn't end up in the film, where I'm actually hanging off the back and just body surfing, skipping across the water. Now that was fun. Looked a lot more dangerous than it was. I mean, it would have been dangerous if you let go, but if you hang on, your boat's going so fast, you're just skipping.
Turn now. Driving those boats, they're like, do a bunch of zigzags and then turn around real fast. You realize you're totally in control and really, you know, doing it. It was really exciting.
My favorite sequence is the boat chase. Hands down, that I think is really sums up what I want to do with the movie.